I, a 26-year-old woman, was set to be married last week. However, the wedding didn't take place because I made the decision to run away the night before the ceremony. I had been engaged to my 26-year-old boyfriend for 6 months, and we had been in a relationship for 3 years. We'd also shared 2 children, twin boys who were now 1 year old. The arrival of our unexpected twins had initially caused tension, as my boyfriend was against having kids at that time. Despite his reluctance, I insisted on keeping the babies and gave him the option to leave without demanding child support. I believed in my ability to raise my children independently due to my strong maternal instinct. Over time, my boyfriend came around, supporting me throughout the pregnancy and proving to be a good father after the twins were born. 6 months later, he proposed and I accepted. We began planning our wedding, and everything seemed perfect. My parents were thrilled, as they liked my now ex-boyfriend. However, the night before the wedding, a phone call changed everything. We were following the tradition of staying in separate places, and after a heartfelt conversation, he forgot to hang up the call. I remained on the line out of curiosity and overheard a conversation between him and his father, revealing a side of him that made me question our 3-year relationship and the impending marriage. I decided to eavesdrop on their conversation, motivated by my ex-boyfriend's dejected and distant tone when confirming to his dad that he was talking to me. Something felt off, and the subsequent exchange still echoes in my mind a week later. His dad questioned whether my ex still felt the same way as he did 2 days ago, and my ex affirmed. His mother joined the conversation, insisting that regardless of his feelings, he needed to go through with the wedding. This sparked a heated response from my boyfriend, asserting his autonomy and refusing to be pushed around. His dad, however, made a weighty proposition, stating that while they couldn't force him to marry someone he didn't love, they could cut him out of their will. His mother, in turn, lectured him about responsibility, emphasizing that as a father, he needed to grow up and commit. She argued that if he was ready for kids, he should be ready for marriage. My ex expressed his frustration, feeling coerced into marrying me despite not feeling ready, solely to avoid being disinherited. He lamented about the lack of consideration for his readiness for milestones in his life, feeling unfairly pressured into situations he wasn't prepared for. In his complaints, he stormed out, leaving his phone behind. His parents continued to discuss his perceived irresponsibility, prompting me to end the call. Stunned and unsure of what to do, I realized that my boyfriend had agreed to marry me under the threat of disinheritance, a revelation that shook me on the eve of our supposed wedding day. I couldn't fathom the situation for the next couple of minutes. None of his recent behavior had hinted at his unpreparedness. Yes, we had our initial argument when I discovered my pregnancy, but since then, he had been a devoted boyfriend and father. His true feelings were hidden behind a remarkable acting facade. Once I gathered myself, I made a swift decision to escape. Fortunately, my kids were with me, so I drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. Arriving late, I settled my fussy kids and blocked my boyfriend and his family without explanation. That night, I cried, realizing the past year had been a colossal lie. Eventually, around 4 in the morning, I found some sleep. The wedding expenses were covered by my ex's affluent parents, relieving me of financial concerns. I texted friends and family that the wedding was off, promising to explain later. I made it clear I didn't want them involved with my ex or his family, trusting they'd respect my wishes. On what was supposed to be my wedding day, I stayed in the hotel, grappling with my emotions and finding solace in my son's company. Despite my devastation, I maintained a strong front for their sake. A day later, I returned home to gather my belongings and move out. After leaving my kids with my parents, I faced my ex's expected reaction. He appeared sleep-deprived, panicked, and concerned. Unsure of the authenticity of his emotions, he demanded an explanation for my actions, asserting that my decision warranted an apology to him and his family. Dismissing cold feet as an unacceptable excuse for humiliation. I didn't say much. I simply informed him that I had overheard his conversation with his parents the other day. He appeared confused for a moment, and when it sank in, he couldn't hide the shame. I didn't feel the need to elaborate or engage in further conversation. After uttering those words, I entered the house while he waited outside in the yard. Gathering the essentials, I left without exchanging another word. There was nothing left for me to say. He had acted according to his beliefs, and now I was doing what I believed was right. I no longer aspired to be a wife. My focus shifted to being a devoted mother. Almost a week passed without communication, and I thought it was the end for us. I had nothing to express, and he seemed to share the sentiment, or so I believed. However, a few hours ago, he unexpectedly appeared at my parents' place, pleading to speak with me. By now, my parents and close friends were aware of the situation, and they hesitated to let him in. Despite their reservations, I agreed to talk to him one last time. I opted to stay in the front yard, fearing a heated argument that might disturb the sleeping babies. In our conversation, he apologized for everything he had put me through. He professed his love for me, admitting he wasn't ready for marriage. He expressed affection for our children and insisted on being a part of our lives despite the revelations from that night. I found myself at a loss for words, grappling with doubts and trust issues. While he wanted a second chance without his parents' interference, I was uncertain about the path forward. He expressed a desire to work things out, but I couldn't ignore the deception that had persisted for almost a year. Now faced with the decision of whether to give our relationship a second chance, I'm torn. I want my kids to have a relationship with their father, but trust is a significant hurdle. As for myself, a break seems appealing, especially after this tumultuous week. I'm undecided about the future of our relationship. Update. Hey, everyone. It's been a while, and I appreciate the overwhelming support. I've been busy with work, kids, and moving out. The advice I've received has been incredibly helpful. I consulted a lawyer about custody arrangements, and I've decided to pursue full custody. Some people have sent hurtful messages, accusing me of being a selfish mother for considering reconciliation. I want to emphasize that I'm a mother, but I'm also a human being. It's only been a week since that phone call, and moving on completely is a process. This was a 3-year relationship, for goodness sake. In the throes of strong emotions, I genuinely loved him, and that vulnerability led me to consider reconciliation. However, as I've regained stability, I recognize the imperative of prioritizing myself and my children. Despite the initial hurtful judgment on the internet, I anticipated it in this digital age. 2 days after calling off the wedding, I began the search for a lawyer, a process that took time as I sought someone I felt comfortable with and could trust completely. Custody discussions were never part of our prior conversations, as we never foresaw such a circumstance. Now that we're at an impasse, I believe it's crucial to take legal measures to secure my children's well-being. While I doubt my ex's desire for custody, I'm wary of his conservative and orthodox parents, who may object to their son not having custody of their grandchildren. I'm preparing for potential challenges. Our last conversation was around 3 days ago, and the lack of contact since then reinforces that, regardless of his words, he's not ready to be with me or willing to make the necessary changes. His recent expressions of wanting to make things work appear hollow and meaningless. The eroded trust between us makes it clear that I won't be with a man who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. Ending the relationship is the best course of action. I plan to communicate my decision soon, hoping it won't escalate into a custody dispute. Update 2. I've informed my ex that I won't be getting back with him and that I intend to file for full custody. I assumed he would understand, given his earlier admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't make this decision. I expected him to appreciate not being forced into something he wasn't prepared for. But his reaction has heightened the challenge. Oh, okay. Good on you for managing preschool then. I got her in because I was diagnosed with depression after my husband's death. I got a doctor's note and everything. Wow, I didn't know that was an option. Anyway, the reason I came today is that I need advice. Elizabeth's next statement left me shocked. Would you mind paying our property taxes? What? What property taxes? Where is this coming from? We don't have money to pay property taxes. Why would you think we'd pay it for you? You said we could ask you for anything, didn't you? Well, yes, but plus you guys were the ones who insisted we live on that land. We never insisted. Regardless, property taxes for that land are higher than other places, and it's really causing us problems. Why don't you just work a bit and pay yourself? I can't work. I've even got Emily in preschool based on the excuse that I can't work due to mental illness. That's not our problem. Please, if we can't pay the property tax, we won't be able to live in that house. Look, I don't know all the details, so I'll discuss it with Robert when he gets home. Please do. After showing up out of the blue and making such an unexpected request, Elizabeth left. When Robert got home, I told him about Elizabeth's sudden visit and her asking us to pay property taxes. Of course, Robert was surprised, but he was also angered by her audacity. A few weeks later, we invited Elizabeth over to our house to discuss something important. We timed it so that her daughter, Emily, was at preschool, allowing the three of us to talk. Elizabeth arrived in a good mood. She probably thought we were going to help her with her property taxes. Robert, it's been a while, Elizabeth greeted. You seem well. I heard from Jennifer, but let's hear it from you. What do you want to talk about? Well, I hate to be a bother, but I came to ask for help with the property taxes, she admitted. Why can't you pay them yourself? Is there a reason? I'm still dealing with emotional stress and can't work. With a young child, I just don't have the money for the taxes. So, you can't handle unexpected expenses. Exactly. The property taxes are way too high. After all, it was you guys who decided we should buy that house on that land, so it's your responsibility to help us out. Why? You have the money in the first place. I'm a single mom, and it's tough. Survivor's benefits alone don't cut it. I'm barely making ends meet and can't handle sudden expenses like taxes. You're lying about not having money, Robert retorted. I'm not. I lost a breadwinning husband. Are you out of touch with reality? If you think I don't know anything, Robert said something rather cryptic. Hearing those words, Elizabeth's expression changed slightly. Whoa, you're scaring me, Robert. You're getting more than just survivor benefits, aren't you? What are you talking about? That's all I get, she defended. It's pointless to lie. I know everything. You're getting money from life insurance too. Elizabeth remained silent. My brother had life insurance, you know. He was insured for about $1,000 a month until about age 60. So, as his wife, it's my right to receive that money. You have no right to question me. But you do get a good amount of money every month with survivor's benefits and the insurance money, don't you? It's still not enough for everyday living. We have a mortgage. You've paid off the mortgage, haven't you? Don't you also get various other forms of assistance? How do you know all this? My brother consulted with me about everything, especially financial matters. So, I know it all. I see. But like I said before, I'm his wife, and Emily is his daughter. How we use that money is none of your business. Fair point. But since money is coming in, you should manage it properly and pay your own taxes. Robert, you work for a big corporation, and you're rich. Why can't you just help us out a little? You're being too stingy. Elizabeth still seemed unconvinced, listening to this conversation. I finally understood why Elizabeth, even after losing her husband, continued to live lavishly without working. I couldn't complain. Money was something her late husband left for her. But Robert wasn't done talking, and that's when I learned an unbelievable fact. So earlier, you said the kid is James's. Is that true? What are you talking about? Of course it is. Well, that's good because if it's not, we have a big problem. Isn't that quite rude? I just lost my husband. Don't start accusing me of things. I, who had been silently listening, quickly interjected. That's crossing the line, man. But Robert continued. You see, my brother consulted me when he found out about their pregnancy. What about him? He said that judging by the due date, there's no way the child could be his. What do you mean? He was always on an extended business trip and hadn't been home during that time. He was worried that the child might not be his. That's absurd. I thought so too initially. James said there was no evidence of an affair. Then he passed away before we could gather any. So it was a misunderstanding, right? After James was gone, I couldn't shake off the thought. So I investigated. What? Whether you have been unfaithful? My jaw dropped next to me in a state of shock from this newfound information. Robert continued speaking to Elizabeth. I was planning to take my time gathering evidence, but since you came to our home, I hurried my investigation. And what did you find? You're living with another man now, aren't you? So what if I am? He's someone I started seeing after my husband passed. I see. I was wondering if the man you're living with is the child's father. But it turns out he's not Emily's father. It's your brother, H. Do you have any proof? Sorry to say, I approached Emily and the man at the park and got a single hair strand from their clothing. That's creepy. I do feel a bit guilty, but it's for my brother. And what did you do with it? James is no longer with us. So I submitted the hair, along with mine, for a DNA test. According to Robert, even if it's not from the father, a close relative can provide enough genetic information for a paternity test. Robert went on. The test showed that Emily is not James's child. Elizabeth looked down, unable to speak. Then she finally spoke, almost in a whisper. So what does that mean? It's heartbreaking for James. Speaking ill of the dead accomplishes nothing, maybe. But since my brother can't find justice, I plan to file a lawsuit against you and your lover for damages. What are you talking about? We're getting married soon. Oh, really? Well, that makes things easier. Since the house is already paid off, you should just sell it. Then you can use that money to pay for both your compensations. Why should I? If you can afford the compensation, you're welcome to stay. But your fiancé doesn't work right. How do you know that? You can get by without working now, but that changes when you're married. It's none of your business. The conversation was far from over, and an angry Elizabeth tried to leave. Robert spoke up. I'll handle the property taxes for you. I'll also start the process for selling the house. Angry, Elizabeth stormed off and eventually sold the house, just as Robert suggested. The house sold quickly due to its desirable location and being relatively new. Elizabeth paid the compensation with the money from the sale. Apparently, Elizabeth and her man got married. But because of that, she would no longer receive the survivor's benefits she had been getting due to her husband's passing. Ignorant Elizabeth had no clue about this. She bought a cheap used house with the money from the sale. No longer a single mom, her financial aid dried up, as did the survivor's benefits. Both Elizabeth and her new husband had to start working. Elizabeth, once a spender on fashion and beauty, marked the start of a tougher life. Her husband couldn't keep a job, and the marriage soon fell apart. Elizabeth was back to being a single mom, but now with no financial aid coming in, she had to work desperately to make ends meet. For us, the storm has passed, and our peaceful days have returned. We were even blessed with a child we had longed for. I can't wait to meet the child that I will have with my beloved Robert. We will give our child the middle name of my late brother-in-law, ensuring that his memory will always be with us. In my second update, I confronted my ex, expressing my decision not to reconcile and notifying him of my intention to file for full custody. I anticipated he would understand, considering his previous admission of not being ready for marriage or kids. I believed he should have felt grateful that I wasn't pushing him into an unprepared role. However, he reacted poorly, engaging in arguments and insisting I couldn't do this to him. He suggested that breaking up was acceptable, but taking his kids away wasn't. This argument might have made sense in a typical relationship, but our circumstances were far from ordinary. As you already know, my ex had initially opposed having kids, and until a week ago, he wasn't ready to be a father. Suddenly, he was fiercely fighting for custody, raising suspicions of external influence, likely from his controlling parents. During our argument at a restaurant, I attempted to calm him down, embarrassed by the scene he was causing. In an effort to avoid a protracted custody battle that I couldn't afford financially or energetically, I sought a rational conversation. I knew his parents could afford top-notch lawyers, potentially dragging out the legal process. My approach was to reason with him and hope he wouldn't contest custody. I reminded him of his previous stance on not being ready for kids until a week ago, asserting that my proposed arrangement was in the best interest of all involved. I suggested he could live his life unburdened by marriage and kids, while I took care of our children. However, he claimed to have changed his mind, asserting he was now ready to be a father. This sudden shift seemed suspicious, leading me to inquire further. He admitted that his parents pressured him to fight for custody after they learned about the canceled wedding. They accepted that I wouldn't marry him but insisted on joint custody to retain a connection with their grandchildren. Threatened with disinheritance, he begged me to agree to joint custody, but I was disgusted and chose to leave. I couldn't fathom that once again, he was succumbing to his parents' influence, even when I had given him an easy way out. He didn't want to be a father or commit to me. His primary concern was his parents' wealth, driving him to such lengths. If his sole focus was their money, I didn't want him anywhere near our kids. They deserved better. Rejecting child support, I made it clear I didn't want him involved with me or my children. His lack of backbone, willing to do anything to stay in his parents' good graces, was disappointing but unsurprising. Since then, I blocked him everywhere, refusing to engage in any communication. His last message proposed a joint custody agreement with the promise of splitting his inheritance once his parents passed away, an absurd suggestion that revealed his true priorities. Falling for a spoiled individual was my mistake, as a self-made woman who worked hard for everything. Despite his initial efforts to change, it became evident that he was a skilled actor who had deceived me for 3 years. Now, I see him for who he truly is, and I have no interest in exploring more about him. I am done and content with raising my kids on my own. No father is better than one who rejects fatherhood. I am confident that I made the right decision, hoping he comes to his senses and terminates his parental rights rather than dragging this into a prolonged custody battle. I'll continue praying. Update 3. Hello, everyone. It's been a while, and I'm here to share some good news. Although it's been a lengthy period since the last update, I've been occupied. First and foremost, my babies and I have moved into a smaller apartment that I can now call mine. Unlike the house I shared with my ex, this place is near my parents' house. So my parents can visit occasionally to keep an eye on the kids. Additionally, I've hired a full-time nanny to assist me because I can't afford to stop working. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be able to afford such help right now. Financially, my parents are providing support, and I am immensely grateful for their assistance. None of us saw this situation coming, but they're doing their best, and I'm truly appreciative of having such loving and supportive parents. Now, onto the part I know people are curious about, my ex. Well, he has officially signed away his parental rights. I can't pinpoint exactly what prompted this change, but my best guess is that he decided to stand up to his parents, or perhaps they finally relented. According to a friend, he has moved out of his previous residence, indicating a shift in his circumstances. He apologized to me once again and expressed a desire to offer financial compensation. However, I declined, as I had no intention of accepting money from my ex-boyfriend. Despite potential criticism for this decision, I remain steadfast. While I've forgiven him, it doesn't mean I have to accept any form of compensation. I simply want to move on, and with my parents' support, we are fully capable of raising my kids without his involvement. I conveyed to him that it was okay, but requested no further contact, a boundary he has respected so far. Currently, my focus is solely on my kids, striving to provide them with the best life possible. I have no time for sadness or anger towards my ex. My energy is devoted to being the best mother I can be for my children. That's the update for now, and stay tuned for more stories from Argo relationships. Second story. My name is Jennifer, and I'm married to Robert. Robert has a younger brother named James, who is 3 years younger than him. The woman James brought home as his future wife, Elizabeth, turned out to be surprisingly inappropriate. "Hey, I'm getting married," James said with genuine happiness, introducing us to his fiancé. "Hi, I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you." Elizabeth was a flashy dresser adorned in designer brands, her bold makeup making her initially intimidating. However, after talking to her, we discovered she was outgoing and charming. We were genuinely happy for our brother-in-law's upcoming marriage. Robert's parents, unfortunately, had both passed away, his mom when he was in 7th grade, and his dad 2 years ago. As a result, neither Robert nor his brother-in-law had parents anymore. "I bet Mom and Dad are celebrating your news up in heaven," Robert remarked. "Look, I've been depending on you for so long, Robert. I don't expect that to change once we're married," James added. "Don't say that, or I'll be taking care of you forever," Robert replied, and they both laughed joyfully, showcasing their close bond. As we absorbed the sudden engagement news, I inquired about their future living arrangements. "So where are you guys planning to live after getting married?" I asked. "We're thinking of building our own place. The thing is, I travel a lot for work, so we're still undecided on where to build," my brother-in-law answered. Since he often had to travel for work, deciding on a location posed a challenge. "We don't have reliable parents to lean on. If we live near each other, we can help one another if something happens," he explained, highlighting the importance of their close relationship. I concurred, acknowledging that my parents lived far away, and it seemed Elizabeth, his spouse, also had no parents nearby. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. However, Robert and I weren't as affluent as Robert, so the decision to live nearby posed a financial challenge. Though the idea was initially a casual suggestion, they took it seriously and moved into a house relatively close to us. After settling in, we frequently enjoyed barbecues and drinks together, creating pleasant memories. Months later, they received the joyful news of a baby on the way. Tragedy struck, though, as my brother-in-law, elated about the impending arrival, met an untimely end on his usual work trip. Robert was consumed by grief, mourning the sudden loss of his beloved brother. Strangely, Elizabeth, his spouse, didn't appear as devastated as one would expect, considering the circumstances. While she did shed tears, they seemed artificial, leaving me uneasy. Concerned, I reached out to her, offering support for anything she might need after the baby arrived. "Thank you," she replied. But that was the last we saw of Elizabeth. Months later, a birth announcement arrived, prompting us to visit. However, she claimed to be too busy to invite us in, so we left the gift at the door and returned home, bewildered by the inability to see the baby. Our distrust toward Elizabeth grew as she consistently avoided us, citing business whenever we tried to connect. A year passed since my brother-in-law's death when, out of the blue, Elizabeth showed up at our house. "It's been a while, Jennifer. Long time no see. How have you been?" she greeted. Confused, I inquired about the sudden visit. "I came because I need some advice," she explained. When asked about Emily, her response was surprising. "Emily's at preschool. Being alone at home with her all the time was driving me crazy. I enrolled her right after she was born." "Oh, I see. Are you working then?"